so much for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure. Now, I want to go back to the days of Honey Bunch, when you were galloping across the fields of Gloucestershire, because that's where you grew up, wasn't it, Gloucestershire?
Yep, Cheltenham, only half a mile from the racecourse. So, I really feel for Cheltenham. But Honey Bunch was badly named. He was a horrible little so-and-so. If you went to catch him, he'd turn his back on you like they do, and you go nearer and he'd trot off. Yeah, horrible. And my sister used to lead me. I didn't want to ride. Used to lead me before school, her on a bicycle and me on Honey Bunch with a rope. And we'd be going along the lanes. You could do it in those days. We go along the lanes. I'd be on the grass verge. She's on the road. And she'd say, right, you know how the teachers do it. Right, we'll trot now, And then we'll canter now. Oh, I don't want to canter, and I'd jump off. I'm a horrible little boy, horrible brat. And she got round that by not saying we'll canter one day. She just slapped the horse on the backside and let it go.
Oh, wow.
Of course, well, Hannah, once you've had speed, you think, well, isn't this better than this trotting bit,
Yeah. So is that then how you got your love for speed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it was no intention of making it a living, It was just the fact that I failed 9 O-levels at school. And what else does a small, lightweight do?
So did you go to a riding school or anything?
No, but my sisters rode and my parents rode occasionally, just fun riding. We did a few shows, but, I wasn't very good. The only cup I had was a nice size, big cup, 2 silver handles on it. And it was for the best under 16 rider at Cheltenham Horse Show. But it only dawned on me years later that my father, being chairman of the show, might have had some influence on that.
That's a good advantage.
Yeah.
Lots of wins. So from then, so you said from school, you didn't get many O-levels. So from then, is that when you pushed yourself towards racing?
I got 0 from 9. I mean, they're GCSEs now, aren't they? But 0 from 9. And I was at Tewkesbury Grammar School. I wasn't thick. I was always in the top 3 in every subject. In my mocks, superb. Come the examination day, I think I was just cocky. I didn't read the questions. And it's so important. How can you answer if you don't know what you're answering? I read the first few lines and go, diddly squats, and away I went. But I often thought I should sit them again. And then I thought, but wouldn't it be awful if I failed them all again?
Be a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
So I read somewhere that it was a member of your family that was in the racing industry.
Yep. My sister married a jockey, excuse me, called Paddy Cowley, an Irishman, obviously. And he was doing well. And around Cheltenham in those days, there were 10 trainers. And they trained up on top of Cleve Hill. Those lovely photographs you get on ITV looking down from it. We used to, just going up from Prestbury, Woodmancote and the Southam, the villages there, just getting up onto the hill would make a horse half fit. And then there's 3,000 acres of common land there. I mean, we could gallop forever, it was brilliant. And as I say, 10 trainers, lots of Gold Cup winners, et cetera, et cetera. And so there were jobs around where I lived. But the premise of if you go to a small stable, you'll get the rides is correct. But when they've got a fancied one, they're going to get a jockey, I mean, I got the hard pullers, one eye, bad legs, but it got you going. But Hannah and I went 4 years as a professional jockey in different small stables without a winner, 60 rides. I mean, that was horrendous. How anybody continued to give me rides, I don't know.
So what then kept you motivated to continue with it and not give up?
What else could I do, But I did work it out eventually. I worked out that if you went somewhere where there were lots of winners, the crumbs off the table would be enough to feed you. And I knew from being in the weighing room for that time that Fred Winter, who was champion jockey, was about to retire at the age of 39, which was late in those days. Jockeys, Josh Gifford, the late Josh Gifford, lovely man, retired at 29, and other people went 30, but Fred Winter had gone on to 39. So I approached him and said, look, you know, you hardly know me. You're at the top end where the radiator is in all the changing rooms. I'm down by the loo. But he said, oh, no, of course I know you. He said, you ride well. You're honest, and horses jump better for you than most people. So he said, you can have a job with me. I'm going to start in June. And he said, you'll have to fight your corner because there'll be other lads wanting rides. You know, you won't be stable jockey, of course. You'll just get whatever you get. And his letter to me then, so that was, I don't know, probably February. His letter to me in April or May said, I mean, it's quite public school attitude, really, not dear Richard or anything. You know, we're jockeys in the same room, even though I'm low down. It was Pitman. I'd like you to start on June the 1st. It's lovely and sunny and warm. You'll be the first person here, along with 2 others will join later in the week. We don't have any accommodation, but I've got a very good tennis court changing room, and it was wooden. And he said, it's summer, so, you know, you can bed down there until we sort something out. I mean, can you imagine that in this day and age, you know, saying you have to live in the tennis hut?
It sounds quite an adventure, actually.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you're young, you don't care, do you? You just want to get your foot on the ladder.
So what was Fred Winter's method of training like? Was that different to trainers today?
Yeah, they all trained differently. I mean, there were some great trainers in Lambourn, and there was a good 10-foot high wall between Fuke Warwin, who trained 3 Grand National winners, Gold Cups, everything, and Fred Winter, you see. And we used to, big rivalry, and Fred used to ride for Fuke Warwin, and it was a lot of rivalry, you know. We'd say, oh, Over the Walls had a winner, you know. And so that's how it went on. And those trainers, Stan Meller started training. There were quite a few well-established jump trainers. The Lambourn Gallops, gorgeous. And there's a round bowl on the grass and an all-weather where you'd go a mile round, and then it would straighten up and then go up a hill, and you could go straight up a steep hill or go sideways. So, you know, it wasn't interval training like we have now. It was long training. And Fred and I, once we had a decent string, we'd go up together first and do it, and we'd walk down the hill a little bit, and we'd sit there like Indians watching the string, you see. And of course, they'd go round the bowl and then up the back of the hill, and you could hear every word because it reverberated across, even though it was some distance, and on a cold, frosty morning, you could hear every word. And, you know, the lads would be coming down and they'd be saying, God, that so-and-so old man's in a bad mood today, isn't he? And Fred would just look at me and smile and said, let that be a lesson. You know, when you're talking, I can hear. So, but great man. So, yes, it was longer work. Now in Lambourn, of course, got no end of a mile long or weather, a 6 furlong or weather, a round or weather, 2 uphills, very, very steep, short but steep. They've got everything. It's a fantastic place to train. But yes, that's a long answer to your question. Methods have changed amazingly.
Do you think that was a better way of training, would you say, like longer distances?
I can't say. I can't say because I've been out of riding work for so long. And it works now, doesn't it? I mean, everyone attributes Martin Pike to changing it. And of course he did. Straight or weather, going nicely uphill. And what was very interesting about Martin, he was a bookmaker's son. His father came in one day and said, I bought a racehorse, you're going to train. You know, no absolute experience whatsoever, but common sense. And he was going to put his all-weather around the edge of this field going up there. And then he suddenly thought, no, it will put pressure on a horse's legs going that way and then that way. Straight line is the way to go. So it's a famous gallop, wood chip. And they were so clever, he even bought an old chipping machine and chipped his own wood for the surface. But another thing that Martin was very clever at, you know, horses get colic, tummy ache. you and I take a Rennie or whatever we take, a horse starts going like a dog who's going to sit down, you know, pouring up the straw because it wants to alleviate the pain and get down. That can kill it because of their huge intestines. As they roll, the intestines can twist. It's called twisted gut, can kill them. And Martin said quite often it's because their bowels aren't working properly, you see. So he said, what makes a horse poo? Put it in a horse box, as if it's going to the races. So if ever they had one with a sign of colic, they'd put it in the horse box, take it all around the villages, around where he trains in Somerset, bing, bingo. No calling the vet out, the blockage had gone. So why I'm saying this, he was ahead of the game because he came from a clean sheet, not from a racing background. He didn't inherit ideas, he thought about his ideas. Anyway, that's, so just a quickly one, everyone thinks Martin invented this interval training, but when I was a kid, the Queen Mother's trainer, Peter Caslett down in Kent, trained that way in a park, but only because that's all he had, was a 2 furlong strip up in the park, you see. So he actually did interval training without probably knowing what it did. You have to keep the heart rate up, you know, you canter up, canter down, half speed up, canter down, let them rip, because you're keeping the heart rate up, but also lowering the pressure on them. It's fascinating. I love seeing how different trainers work.
Yeah, just while we were talking about colic, my mum always taught me to feed horses bran if they've got colic, to push it out. Would you say that's
yeah. Oh yeah, nice bran mash. I don't know if people still feed bran mashes. We used to do it on a Wednesday night after a galloping day, so that they had an easy day on Thursday, and then give them a bran mash on a Saturday night because they had an easy day on Sunday. Whether they do that now with all these modern mixes, I don't know.
I wanted to talk about the riding styles, because thank goodness for YouTube, because most things back in the day I wasn't alive, so it's good that I can watch things. But I noticed that people rode longer in the leg. Am I right in saying that? Why was that?
It all changed. I mean, years ago, before my time, and you know, I'm very ancient, but before my time, people rode full length. And you know, all these old photographs of Beecher's Brook, they are literally lying back on the horse's tail. And then we upped the game over the years, and then it upped again. Although we did have some stylists ahead of their time. Andy Turnell, whose father trained, rode as short as Leicester Piggott over the national fences as Piggott rode on the flat. And his balance was superb. But over Beecher's Brook, in the days when there was a big drop, you had to let the reins slip through your fingers on landing. You know, you go in nice and stylish and get the stride right. But as they're landing, you would slip the reins and sit back, because of the drop, their noses often hit the ground, and you needed your body as ballast to keep their bottom down, because once the tail comes past your eyes, you've had it. So, and Andy Turnell used to ride as short then in those days with the big drops. But in 1975, he was slipping the reins like this, going backwards, and missed the buckle end of the reins and did a double somersault off the backside of the horse. Well, self-preservation, he's done that, you see. And he's grabbed Paul Kellaway, who was landing on Verona, quite happy, thinking, well, that was good. And the next thing, they're both sitting in the grass holding hands. Oh, my golly. But so Andy was ahead of his time, and there were other stylists. The Queen Mother's jockey, David Mould, very stylish, even though he rode slightly longer. The whole thing changed from America, really, with stirrups coming up. And now the toe in the iron. Although I've been brought to account several times because I'm quite critical of toe in the iron, I've seen jockeys on the flat fall off, you know, horse swerves, bong, and the commentators, oh, nothing he could have done about that. Yes, there was. You know, if he'd had his foot in the iron, he wouldn't have come off. And I get a lot of stick, you know, then about it. And now they are riding not actually with the end of the toe in the iron, but diagonally across the ball of the foot.
I thought this is what I wanted to ask you, and I wondered why that was, because it's almost, you're turning your toes right in, aren't you?
Yeah. They say in their own defense that, I mean, it's a style thing, you know, they're all doing it. They say in their own defense that it alters their body weight on top of the horse, and they can get down and more behind him. And that's probably so. I mean, we see all these videos of the jockey coaches getting young people going. It's all about getting very low on the neck, isn't it? And push, push, push. Whereas before, people were more upright. As you know, it's all got to come from the pelvis. You know, you push forward as your bottom half of your body goes back to elongate the horse. If you can get its stride to elongate half an inch, quarter an inch, in 10 strides, it's a short head. You know, it is so important how to push, and they do teach this very well, the jockey coaches. I mean, Mick Fitzgerald, John Reed, all over the country, they've got them. One thing I'm going to ask them on Twitter very shortly is, can you explain, because you don't teach jockeys, why they're all bumping the saddle? You know, when they start pushing.
Yeah.
Okay, get down and behind and push, but some of them are going bump every stride, you know. Sorry if I'm making you sick doing that. But to me, it's ugly. It cannot help them to be bounced on the spine. But anyway, you know, I'm a silly old, you know, they say about jockeys, old jockeys, oh yeah, the fences were stiffer, they were higher and all this. But, you know, you're entitled to an opinion, aren't you?
Yeah. So when a jockey is stood up more, is there a reason for that? Because then, you know, when they're, you've got a group together, and then you can really see the different levels of where the jockey is. Is that a reason for that?
Yes. It's just a matter of what you do yourself when they're standing up. I mean, if you look at jockeys from the sideways, they can be more upright or down, but you need a sort of straight line down through the bulk of your body, whether your trunk is forward, as long as it's down through your hip to your knee, down into the horse. Balance is so important. If you're unbalanced, the horse is unbalanced, isn't it? But no, you can still be more upright and still be correct. It's a matter of preference, really, isn't it? But you're right. When you look at them, you can tell jockeys by their stance, can't you? I mean, look at Bryony Frost now. Always got her head down, very low. Never pushes or pulls at a fence. She's right when she gets there. Her striding is brilliant. John Franklin was and still, in my opinion, one of the greatest men at a fence. He didn't push or pull. He was right when he got there because he was an international show jumper. And Bryony is the same. Oh, incidentally, did you see the recent thing on all social media where she's been given, what's the horse? Black horse, Black Corton.
Oh, yeah.
And she rode him, her first day, rode him over Dartmoor with her father. It's brilliant. I mean, there's one of the loves of her life, you know, horses. And he's got out over the moors. Oh, how brilliant. And they come to a little ford, and she said, now come on, Blackie, you know you can do this, you know, and have a look at it. And then he goes through, and then the next thing is she's jumping a row of gorse bushes. I mean, it is so lovely. Her empathy with horses is just marvelous. I mean, lots of people empathize with them, of course, but she's done an awful lot for females. And how things have changed, Hannah. In my day, when I was riding winners, I had an old mini car, which I had to bump start it in the morning to get going. Bryony's got an Aston Martin. The only other person I know in racing with an Aston Martin jumping is Venetia Williams. She has an Aston Martin for 3 days a week and a BMW 7 Series for the other 4. You know, but for Bryony, little Bryony, you know, but can you just see her looking over the top? You know?
I saw in an interview, actually, you mentioned about a bit of a nerve-wracking experience when you were galloping through a fog. So have you had any other nerve-wracking experiences?
Well, when you first get run away with, it's scary, isn't it? Because you're totally, I mean, presumably you have been, have you?
I go across fields and I can't stop.
Yeah. Well, the first time is always scary. Now, when I was at Fred Winter's to start with, and the string went from 6 the first week to 50, and that was the maximum they had in those days. Walwyn Fred Rymel, Fred Winter, the top people only had 50 horses. Now, although the big trainers won't admit it, they've got a call on nearly 300 because they have outlying yards who are bringing them on. And if I used to do it for local trainers, and if they had one coughing or got a leg, they'd ring up and said, look, what have you got that's fit? You said, we've got these 5, right? A box will get them, you see. So they've got a call on a lot of horses. So we only had 50 horses. And because I'd sort of established myself as the leader of the lads who were going to get rides, I would be at the back and Fred Winter would be at the front. And in the summer, there was a dirt, I mean, the all-weather things now, of course, are synthetic things. It was just rotivated dirt in this circle. And we set off with 26 horses, and he rode a horse called 177 who was so hard pulling, none of us could ever hold it. And he'd be in front. And he said, you go at the back, Richard, just keep your eye on things, you see. Below me, this thing took off, and I was agonizing to hold it, because once you go from 26th to 25th, you're upside another one, you upset that. So I've gone tearing through them, upsetting them all and encouraging them all to run away. And about 10 of us drowned Fred, the trainer, because we were all being run. It was my fault. It was totally out of control. I mean, what goes through your mind is, you know, well, I'll just have to keep going all day until it's tired. Now, being out of control is not nice. But just going back to in the fog on Cleve Hill, there's a big cliff there, you see, and the fog disorientates. You don't know where you are, where you're going. I mean, no one did go over the cliff, but we could have done. And at the moment, it's just getting a resurgence. There's no trainers there for years. Emma Baker, who trained at a smallish way at Stonewall, has moved there. And Luke Harvey has just bought 26 acres in a bungalow, and he trains his own pointer-pointers. So it might get a resurgence.